I'm going to call to order the meeting, this regular meeting of the City of Waynesboro Planning Commission for Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. Nick, do you want to say the Pledge of Allegiance first?
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at the agenda?
Move to approve.
Do I have a second? Everyone in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
The agenda is approved. Everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting held March 21st, 2023?
Move to approve.
Second? Everyone in favor?
Aye.
And the minutes from the previous meeting are approved. We have a public comment period for items not on the agenda. Any comments that you have received or anything? No. Okay. The second consideration of a preliminary plat request by D.R. Horton for 167 lot residential subdivision on 17.344 acres located at 0 Hopeman Parkway, Waynesboro, Virginia, tax map numbers 15-1-45A and 15-1-45B.
Okay, so I did want to provide an update on that. So you'll remember you held the public hearing at your meeting last month, and the Planning Commission had questions about kind of pedestrian infrastructure and potentially a crossing of Hopeman Parkway because of the residential development kind of adjacent to grocery store shopping center. We are still working with legal counsel, and we have had some follow-up discussions with the developer, the applicant. So we're not in a position right now to kind of recommend that be that a decision be made on that.
Okay.
So we wanted to come to you tonight and kind of provide that update and let you know that in our efforts to keep things moving along as quickly as we can for the applicant, our hope would be, rather than waiting until your next regular meeting, we usually reserve the first Tuesday of the month for a work session if needed, and we typically don't need those. But my recommendation this evening would be that you would continue the tabling of that preliminary plat until May 2nd. And we would hold a meeting on May 2nd. And that gives us 2 weeks to kind of work some of those things out. And then certainly if something were to change in the meantime and for some reason we didn't think the second would be possible, I could communicate that to you and we could push it. So I guess, that would be our preference to kind of keep things moving along as quickly as we can for the applicant, if you all would be available for a work session meeting on May 2nd.
Is it appropriate to speak of like which way the wind's blowing or what they're thinking about and what they're considering, or is that just too early?
Well, so we're looking into some ordinance requirements, then we've just had some general discussions with them related to the crossing and also, we are also reaching out to VDOT because there is no receiving pedestrian infrastructure there. Would VDOT have heartburn about a crossing being placed there? If they don't and they think a crossing could potentially be a good idea, what is the extent of that crossing? What does it look like? So there's still there are a lot of things up in the air. The applicant was generally receptive to the idea, but just wanted to get some feeling of what VDOT would like to see, if any type of crossing out there. So there's still some things that are up in the air with that. And our hope would be to get them worked out by May 2nd.
Does the applicants, do their discussions include aligning, or are they open-minded to aligning that crossing?
Yes, so they actually submitted, I guess last week, Friday, a new plat that does show the entrance to the Food Lion Shopping Center and their other entrance lined up. And did they lose a couple lots or something?
Yeah, they lost 4 lots by doing that, so it's now 163 lots as opposed to 167.
So that has been completed, and so really it's just the pedestrian infrastructure discussion that's still a little up in the air.
Okay, I think that's fine with me. I don't know what your all availability is for May 2nd, but
I
I just put it on the calendar, so I think I'll be fine.
Okay.
And I believe if we set that meeting at a regularly called meeting, we don't need to, I mean, we'll still put it on our website, but I
Right.
believe we don't need to run an ad in the paper.
Okay.
So I think it would just be clear if some, if that's your desire to make the motion to table it to the May 2nd, to a May 2nd work session.
And that'll be the only item on the agenda?
We may be able to, based on our discussion tonight on other agenda items, there may be some things we could bring back, but I can't imagine there being much else we would discuss.
All right.
So we want,
I'm ready to table. Is anybody else?
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right, move to table this discussion to the May 2nd work session.
I wanted to ask something that may be not directly related to this, but, it looks like it's gonna be like about 10 units per acre in the land. I mean,
9.4.
not counting,
Yeah.
It's
and are these going to be 3-story, like,
I don't know if they've specifically specified.
I'm not sure they've specified that. I know they
Yeah.
are going to be, they said at the last meeting they'd be potentially 2-bedroom, 2-bath, around 1,200 square feet.
Yeah.
They will have a single-car garage.
And that sounds like either 2-story or, yeah, that sounds like 2-story.
So probably,
I think we need to finish, we need to move to have the meeting. We have a motion. Can I have a second to have a May 2nd
Oh, I'll second that.
work session? Everyone in favor of the work session?
Aye.
The work session that is approved, or,
yeah, this is just something to the side, and maybe not directly related to this, but just something when we talk to developers about putting in, condos or townhouses or what have you, I think that there's a really big need in Waynesboro. I've had people ask me about this, is that a lot of these that are going up, like what's over in that area, over in Park Yard, the 3-story, and there's a real need for either 1-story townhouses, or maybe if they have 1 bedroom upstairs and like a bonus room or something over a garage, because there's a lot of people, and I'm actually one of them. So I talk to a lot of older folks, but there's a really need for something that would be more like one level for older people. And when I'm thinking about these kind of places, that one of these days, I had a neighbor, because they're looking for something, and it's just hard to find what I call an HOA type community. And, one of these days, the building, I know they're trying to get, because you get more units, and you build up, obviously, but one of these days, those people are gonna be elderly that live there, maybe. But there's really not a lot of places for someone that's a little older or looking to downsize, or maybe has health issues or whatever it is, to really, those places usually don't even go up to realtors. I mean, they're gone before they're gone. You have to almost know somebody and clue in that's going for sale. And when we talk to developers, that maybe that's something that we, that maybe, you all, because you're gonna have, I guess you're gonna probably meet with them before we ever see them. Maybe bring that up. I think there is a real need in Waynesboro for that. It really is. I mean, there's a lot of people, I say a lot, I can't never say this, I know 40 or 50, but I know a fair number of people that are looking, they just can't find anything. That would be really nice to do, because the community, our people are getting older, and still, that's still gonna happen in the next, 2 to 15 years, so there's a large population that may be. So again, I didn't know when to bring it up, I just wanted to bring it up.
well, thank
Sure.
you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, now we're on to the staff presentation of vape tobacco shop research.
yeah, so I wanted to provide an update as far as your request to look into a zoning text amendment addressing the placement of vape in tobacco stores. So this presentation is meant to provide the research that I've done over the past couple months since you initiated that. And I'll start with our current ordinance. So our current ordinance does not have a specific use type for vape or tobacco shops. Right now, these are treated as general retail, sales-oriented businesses, and they are permitted in our 3 business zoning districts: the local business, highway business, and then central business. And over the course of my research, the folks in Chesterfield County who are currently working on a similar ordinance were extremely helpful in sharing the research that they had done. And one of the tools they pointed me to was a site called Counter Tools Store Mapper. They did an application specifically for Virginia. And that mapping application showed that there were about 30 businesses in the city of Waynesboro selling vapor tobacco products. 17 of those were convenience or gas stations. We have 6 vape and tobacco specialty stores, 3 grocery stores, 2 retail stores, and then a big box store. And this is a little harder to see than I hoped, but this shows the distribution of those stores across the city, backdropped with our zoning districts. And they're sort of clustered in 3 areas. You have the West Main, the Rosser area, and then sort of the downtown corridor from Rosser, Main and Broad, down to where Main and Broad combine over in this area right here. So that sort of shows where they're currently distributed. So I did review several academic articles that looked at various aspects of the vape and tobacco shops, and then proximity to schools. Some of them were pointed out to me by the Chesterfield County folks, and then others I sort of stumbled across through that reading. So one of the studies I thought was useful looked at data collected from the Truth Continuous Tracking Survey, which is a continually running survey. They send the survey out to around 300 people every month, and then they got their data from that. And they found that about 71% of people aged 15 to 17 using vape products reported obtaining them through a social source, such as a friend or something like that. And they noted that look at the wording here so I get it right. But it was the National Youth Tobacco Survey data from 2021 that said that even those, the Truth Continuous Survey said about 71% of people obtain things through social sources. Of the middle and high school students using tobacco products, about 20% of those obtain them from a vapor tobacco store, while around 19% of them obtain them from gas stations or convenience stores. So there's still definitely a source of these products. A second study I looked at that I thought was useful was one that looked at the proximity of vape shops to middle and high schools within Austin, Texas. They singled out those stores that are selling specifically vape and tobacco products, and then determined what a reasonable walking distance from the school properties would be. They decided on about a half mile. And they found that 40% of those stores were within the half mile, while 48% were within 1 mile. And they suggested in their study that the vape industry is adopting practices that are very similar to the tobacco industry by specifically locating near schools to recruit younger smokers. And that kind of tied into a study that specifically looked at restricting retailers. Once you've restricted the retailers from within a proximity to a school, what happened? And that study did find that that did reduce the density of the retailers around the schools, and that it showed potential for reducing youth smoking. So with literature review out of the way, I'd like to go over now the ordinances that the localities are working on or have approved. The first one is Chesterfield County. This is by far the most detailed ordinance of the ones that localities have done so far, I think. Their approach was to define, instead of vape and tobacco shops specifically, they created a broader definition for recreational substances. So this took into account tobacco products, vape products, but it also brought in hemp and kratom products, and they included food or beverage, so any edibles associated with those, in addition to the vape and tobacco. And then they further broke that out into two specific uses. You have the recreational substances retail off-site use, and then you have the recreational substances retail on-site use. So the off-site use is for any store that is selling recreational substances, and that it makes up sort of the bulk of their inventory. So Chesterfield County laid out 25% of total inventory or 15% or more of the total shelf area. Anything less than that would not be included in this particular use. And then the on-site use would be any establishment where you can use those substances on-site. So something like a hookah bar or something like that. And then they further restricted these establishments' proximity to schools and then similar establishments. So they decided that they would go with 2,000 feet from any public or private school property line and then 2,000 feet from any existing recreational substance use. And then they also limited their hours of operation from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then they permitted them as a conditional use in certain commercial districts. So the next one is the city of Williamsburg. They recently adopted this ordinance. I believe in the last couple months. They created a vape and smoke shop definition and use that is similar to Chesterfield County's in the sense that it takes into account tobacco products, vape products, but then also hemp products. They don't go quite as far. They don't take into account the edibles like Chesterfield County did. But then they also, within their definition, pulled out drugstores, grocery stores, and convenience stores, those places where their primary purpose is to sell other goods that the vape and tobacco products make sort of a smaller size of their sales. So they pulled those out within this definition and said that this does not apply to those particular stores. And then they restricted it to certain zoning districts by special use permit only. They don't have any additional requirements in place prior to that. And then the last one is the city of Norfolk. They have a much stricter definition of vape and smoke shops, basically tobacco products and vape products. And they permit them as a conditional use in several districts, including certain residential, commercial, and downtown districts. They do have a couple specific requirements. One is that the glass portion of all the windows and doors be transparent, and that the shops be unlocked and accessible to the public and law enforcement while they're open. And then in addition to sort of the standard review criteria required as part of their conditional use permit process, they were required to look at the proximity of these establishments to schools, religious institutions, libraries, and other similar type uses, and then look at limiting their hours of operation accordingly. So that's the approach that the city of Norfolk has taken. So to kind of sum up all of that, the studies showed that the limiting the vape and tobacco shops proximity to schools could decrease density of the vape and tobacco shops in the areas around schools. This would happen over time, especially here, because the existing establishments would be grandfathered. And that does have the potential to reduce the use exposure to the marketing efforts of the industry. Creating a broader definition of these products could be useful. It could be useful to include edibles and similar products in the definition, especially as products like hemp and kratom and eventually others could become more prevalent. And then all the ordinances I reviewed did seem to rely on that conditional use permit process to some degree to help regulate the establishments. So turning it back to Waynesboro, I did run a map and I created 500, 1,000, and 2,000 foot buffers around the property lines of all the city schools. And you can sort of see the areas in which the buffer lines take in. The outside thicker line is 2,000 feet, and then sort of the middle line right here is the 1,000, and then you got the 500 feet. So the 2,000 foot buffer around all the city schools takes in most of the commercial area of the central downtown, while the 1,000 foot buffer is most noticeable around Winona and the high school, and was that William Perry? Takes in some of the commercial areas nearby. That gives you a gist. And then overlaid the stores selling those products, and that showed that within 500 feet of city school property, there are 5 stores with 1 vape and tobacco shop. Then within 1,000 feet, there were 12 stores. And of those 12 stores, 3 were vape and tobacco shops. And then within the 2,000-foot buffer, there were a total of 18 stores that sold the products with 4 vape or tobacco shops. And then here's that map again, but this time showing the locations of the stores. And the red is the vape and tobacco shops, and you can see the 2 located near the high school. And then you have one down here closer to Winona, and then another one pretty close to Winona. So that kind of gives you an idea of where they are within those buffered areas. And so now I'd sort of like to open it up to a discussion of where we should go with the text amendment. Should we create a new use type and definition for vape and tobacco shops? Should we make it a broader definition, more like Chesterfield County's recreational substances definition? Or should we make it stricter like Norfolk's? And then if we're restricting proximity, do we want that to be just for schools or also similar establishments? And then consider, should it be a permitted or conditional use in certain or all of the commercial districts? So those are sort of the questions that have resulted from this. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have based on this. And
My first one's about Fishburne. It's a high school right here in town. I was wondering why that wasn't included, or was that just for being just straightforward?
I think I only did the public school properties. I didn't take into account Fishburne, but I can update the map and show that next time.
Well, no, it's more for conversation and discussion than,
And some of the localities did take into account public and private schools, so that's certainly something we could consider.
Yeah, I think that's a fair consideration as well, because I'm sure with Fishburne being right next to Waynesboro High School, if some kid just wanted to connect with another, you get what I'm saying? Like they could all meet up at the coffee shop.
yeah, that's how this is happening. It's friends buying each other
Exactly.
cigarettes.
Exactly.
One
thing you look, though, that there, even though we're talking about vape shops, it looks like there's a lot of vape products sold just at a lot of the general, like the grocery stores and, the box stores.
The gas
I
stations,
just wonder what gas stations, I
online.
don't know.
Well, I know that there's lots of sources for them, but when
Limiting.
a store has something else at stake, they tend to be more restrictive who they sell them to, at least in my interviews with teenagers in Waynesboro.
Oh, yeah, just look at the way out.
They're getting them underage at the vape shops.
Yeah, 100%. You saw
So
40%.
that is,
But how?
they walk in and buy them. Nobody checks their ID. There's no how. They have money, that store wants money. In a company the companies who
But who's the
are,
regulatory authority on that? Like, who's not enforcing
ABC.
that?
Virginia ABC, and I will tell you, I have had a number of interactions with Virginia ABC in the context of working with law enforcement. And ABC recognizes, particularly with the age for tobacco raising to 21, that this is a place where they are not doing a lot of Let me preface this by saying, based on an anecdotal conversation I've had with one ABC agent, they recognize that this is a problem,
Right.
and that it's within their regulatory purview. The problem is, or maybe not the problem, but they're very often their ability to enforce is limited to civil penalties,
Right.
and their ability to enforce stuff is challenged in a number of ways. So very often, they won't take any kind of action on alcohol licensure unless they send a ABC undercover agent into the store to make a buy.
So what about a bar?
It's an amorphous area in terms of enforcement, and there is certainly more that could be done in terms of enforcement. But ABC is the regulatory agency that has the authority to do, I mean, any law enforcement agency could take it on themselves, there's a state code provision. Any law enforcement agency could take it on themselves to recruit somebody who was over the age of 18 but under the age of 21, and send them into one of these stores, and then take enforcement action. But ABC sort of is the primary person, that, just much like with alcohol licensure, is sort of the primary one that does that stuff.
And the age to buy nicotine now is 21.
That's
That's
right.
already changed. Yeah.
Yes, and having spoken at length to both the chief of police in Waynesboro and the Augusta County Sheriff, the source of things where they're purchasing them, I know that they get them outside of purchasing them, but the source where underage are purchasing them is by and large at the vape stores.
I think it's obvious both.
Well, and CVS has something more to lose if they
Right.
sell an underage kid a vape. These guys, that's their whole game. And that's, categorically, that's where, here in Augusta County and Waynesboro, per conversation with the chief of police and the Augusta County Sheriff, that's where they're sourcing, the ones that they purchase retail.
And if you look at the map's obviously predatory. Like if you look where they're placed, there's no other. That's also you can use the emotion in it. I have a little bit of a bias. I'm a father, but you can see how there's a huge chunk just placed right in front of the school, and like it's obvious.
Well, there's only 2 vape shops in front of the school, but there are plenty,
Right.
like, there's CVS,
Right.
there's BP, gas station, stuff like that. So I think most of those things are just because it's the core of the city.
Right.
It's not necessarily,
But I still think we as a community can make an effort to protect our children, especially while they're in our care at public schools, from predatory marketing.
But I also see the other side of capitalism, of allowing businesses to function. When I saw the presentation, I didn't appreciate the way that Norfolk had the clause of completely allowing all police enforcement just to walk in whenever they want without a warrant. I think warranted entry is important when it comes to all business and all citizens.
Well, but if they're open to the public,
Right,
they
right,
have a
right.
general invitation to any member of the public,
Oh, yeah,
including
yeah.
law enforcement, to make entry.
Okay,
Yeah.
from looking at it, obviously that was a general overview. It seemed like they could just kind of walk in and say, "Give me your books." And I could see that getting a little washy.
Well, I think what that ordinance is designed to, what that specifically, that provision is designed to preclude is the stores that are set up where, and I'm familiar with these for another reason, but
Thank
you walk up, you knock on the door, the guy comes to the door and lets you in.
Okay.
And the door's locked. And so there's no way to monitor what's going on inside the business. Whether or not you think, again, leaving aside whether or not you think a law enforcement agent should be able to look over the business
Right,
on the
right,
shoulder
right,
at any
right.
given time. That's the specific business design. The reason, by the way, that those businesses are very often designed that way is to prevent theft in the store and stuff like that. So that's why those are, I think that's, without knowing more,
Okay.
that's probably what that part of that ordinance is probably specifically designed to address.
And then again, just you can see my bias as a father. I lean in the direction of that 2,000, but I also think we should provide some sort of mixed use option because that does push them pretty far out, closer to the residential side of the Waynesboro city proper area. So if there's a mixed use option for them to move to or to be open up shop, because it is a legal substance, they should be allowed to sell in some way, shape, or form. But completely eliminating their choice and ability to do so, I think, may be irresponsible as we go down the line in the future.
and that's where I'm at too. Like, I think it's a burden on free enterprise without actually addressing the problem of this stuff getting to people that are underage. And it's just, I don't think this is the way this isn't the right tool to solve that problem. That's where I'm at.
Well, otherwise, you could say, why not make it 3,000 feet? Just push them out in the county.
Right? Libraries, the preschools.
The trouble is you've already got, you've got a number of these already. So
Well, and
Which was suddenly being
Whatever-
enshrined.
whatever distance is chosen, and I think the map kind of does a good job with that. I don't know how solid we'd be with 2,000 feet. we haven't completely eliminated all business zoned
Right.
area, because you have some, that's right out there at the end, but you have severely limited it. So yeah, I mean, I think 2,000 we'd be okay, because we haven't said, okay, not all business zoning, but yeah, if you went farther and eliminated all business zoning from the buffer, that could be subject to.
That, again, would be only be new.
Right.
I don't think, I mean, leaving aside the merit of doing this or not, to me, unless the definition of recreational substances also includes Delta 8, Delta 9, and THC,
Right.
it's less of a crime in the Commonwealth to possess marijuana as a juvenile than it is tobacco. It's a civil penalty, it's a crime for tobacco. And Delta 8 and Delta 9 are completely unregulated because they've been developed specifically to avoid THC regulation. Something like, and don't quote me on this, 70% of criminally involved juveniles with substance abuse disorders, their substance abuse disorder is related to THC or CBD abuse. So if we think this is a good idea, and leaving aside the arguments about free enterprise, why are we choosing tobacco and not CBD, THC, and THC derivatives, which are demonstrably more dangerous because of the psychotropic effects they have on
Right.
children? So I think that, to me, if we're going to do this, we've got to include those much more dangerous substances as well.
Or booze, or skill games, or.
And that does, I think, it opens the question, the larger policy question, as to whether or not this is something, I mean, yeah, next we're going to say gun stores and liquor stores.
Everything that
And
everybody does.
and that's part of a larger conversation. But
Right.
again, I don't think, we've got to have CBD, THC, THC derivatives, and marijuana derivatives in any definition. If our aim is to protect kids from dangerous substances, it's got to have those things in it.
I agree with you completely in regard to being starting out as restrictive as we can, because those things are coming down the pipe anyway. I mean, and we as a society can't keep up with the bad things that happen. We can't, so we have to figure out a way to at least shield our kids. And if free enterprise is the issue, why have zonings at all?
Well, I just have big questions if.
Why have zoning at all, though? Why not, do you want a
Well, to
McDonald's
plan our
next to your house
communities.
in a neighborhood?
To plan our communities appropriately, but that's mixing a commercial use with a residential use. We're not talking about putting these vapes in a subdivision. We're talking about allowing these vapes at all.
Well, these vapes have never been an issue before because they haven't been a thing.
They filled a lot of empty
know?
buildings. So has gambling recently, all the skill games that have popped up.
At what cost?
Exactly. And if we enshrine these businesses and grandfather them in, a better business, a more considerate business in regards to regulating age and stuff like that will never be able to come in and compete because they'll always have the location that's grandfathered in.
Right.
But if we leave it wide open, all of a sudden, you might have somebody selling pot that actually cares about the laws and the
Do
restrictions
they
and the legal
still need to be
stuff.
selling it next to
And
the
that-
high school?
But put the other guy out of business.
Do they still need to be selling it next to the high school?
What difference is it if they're not selling to minors?
It makes a difference. Clearly, it makes a difference.
I
Statistically,
disagree.
it makes a difference.
That's not what I got out of
Okay.
the reports.
I think it makes a difference. I think it makes a difference from what all the studies I've read, and I've read quite a few.
The other thing is, though, I mean, it's a good thing to try to protect kids, but the thing is, if kids want it, a friend
Right.
can get it. I mean, you're gonna have people that can go outside of these areas or inside the areas and buy, I hate to say it, but when I was younger, I could get alcohol illegally pretty easy.
Yeah, I did.
Not proud of it, but,
Yeah. I wish I never picked up that first pack of Marlboros.
and it was very easy to get without, you didn't even have to try.
And I think that's the bigger issue. If we can go after that, I'm all about it. But I don't think that's what this is going after.
I think
I think the heart is in the right place, but
I think we have to hit it from any angle that we can, and we have to be prepared for what's coming down the pipes. This is not a use that has been a thing in the past.
who's to say we're even allowed as a city government to regulate something that's legal? Delta 8 and those derivatives, they're legal substances. The city can't just believe that they should be illegal and charge penalties.
I'm not saying that they're being illegal.
I mean, we just can't wave our wand and make that happen.
And that's exactly what we're not doing. We're not just waving our wand. If I was saying they couldn't be anywhere in the city, I would be waving my wand. I think what I see is happening is making every effort to steer the targeted marketing away from our most, kids who are vulnerable to it. At whatever level we can. And so,
I can respect your motivation, and I appreciate the thoroughness of the report. Again, I think this pursuit has a lot of heart, but I just don't think that it has a lot of merit. I don't think this is going to solve the problem.
I'm not saying it's going to solve the problem. I'm saying it's one way to address the problem. We got a lot of work to do in our communities.
And the other thing, I know we checked with a lot of these bigger, larger cities, but what does, Stanton or Augusta County, well, I don't know, the county's pretty wide.
I don't think they have any regulations. We focused on these because they were really the only ones in Virginia who have done anything at this point.
So a lot of the smaller communities haven't really done anything.
No.
Augusta County zoning was interested to see what we found out. Because they're on the same cusp that we are.
And one of the upshots of this would be that, for example, if you have a company like Beverly Street Cigar in Stanton wanted to come to downtown Waynesboro, they might struggle with that decision. And so there's a potential, and that's as far as I know, a good upstanding business that doesn't have any of the problems that you're concerned about in downtown Stanton. They certainly, from my interactions walking in there, appear to be very responsible and very accountable to their community, and that's the potential. That's the sort of business you might deter from coming to downtown. And I have qualms about that because
Exactly.
I think we got a lot of issues when it comes to downtown and commercial uses in the city. I don't know. I see the merit. Like other members of the commission, I see the merit in doing it. I think there is some merit in doing it because of the exploitive nature, but I have concerns about the deterrence it creates for otherwise good businesses.
And what are the legal, if say a vape shop, could you regulate it that the ones that exist, if for some reason one closes, does that mean is the location going to be grandfathered? Suppose it changes.
If the vape shop closes and another retail store goes in there that has nothing to do with vape shops, then they couldn't convert back to a vape shop.
But if it's a vape shop.
But if it continues to be vape shops and maintains that, then they would keep that vested right in that use. Yeah.
The new owner is still there.
Or if the building were to set vacant for 2 years, then then we could say, now if you sell the property or someone leases it, they need to meet the new code. But 2 years is the state requirement.
What does the impact of this look like from an enforcement perspective for the city? How many? It doesn't seem like we've got a whole lot, but.
So, mainly, the ones that exist, they exist. If an ordinance went into place, the tricky thing I see is in the percentage of, if you're saying Walmart or CVS, what is the percentage that they, that would be mainly them on a site plan, I guess, us checking to see, are them just telling us what percentage of their business is that, to kind of say, okay, those fall underneath that. But if it's pure vape kind of specialty store, it would be, just us looking at whatever proximity range is considered and saying, yes, you're allowed, or no, you're not, or you have to get a special use permit, or however the ordinance is structured. But the ones that already exist, they would continue, if someone, say one closed down and it sat on the market, and then we had someone call and say, I'm interested in buying this, but I saw your ordinance change. Can I do a vape shop there? We'd say, yep, you can buy it for a vape shop also. But if it was to sit for 2 years, then we would have,
And I don't even know what else vape shops sell. But suppose a vape shop, to get around it, you primarily sell vape products or whatever, because I don't even know much about vape. But suppose you sell,
Paraphernalia.
not only paraphernalia, but suppose you sell some type of novelties or something
I mean,
too. Does that, and even though what you're really pushing, or what your main product or your main commodity is the vaping materials or the vape, whatever.
Well, you're gonna.
I mean, typically it'd be, yeah, based on the name, or, there would be things, I mean, yes, certainly people could have devious ways of trying to avoid
Selling
it, yes.
potato chips or salted snacks.
This is the way
Yeah.
this is the way that marijuana works in the District of Columbia. Is it's still against the law to sell marijuana, but it's not against the law to possess it or share it with your friends. So you go into a vape shop and you buy
A t-shirt.
t-shirt and you get a vape, right? And it's a t-shirt shop. There are all sorts of potential enforcement issues here, and people who are creative enough, I guess that might, though, in that case, you're not gonna have the blinking neon sign that says,
Right.
come in here to have vapes, which I guess is what the ordinance is primarily designed
Right.
to preclude, more is the marketing more so than. I mean, maybe we need a sign ordinance.
Right.
I'm up
Don't
for
throw anything at
anything. It's 85% in Augusta County and Waynesboro, 85% of their discipline problems are vapes. Kids are the sheriff calls me, I talk to him about once a week. Kids are dropping over from sucking on a vape in the hallways. And if it's a huge problem. And if we don't start chipping away at it, I don't see us as a responsible community. And I'm all for, even if it's 500 feet, I don't care what it is. They just don't, we can make it every little bit harder, one less kid runs the risk of.
For me, it's a principle thing. I don't see it, but I do see it
Right,
at work
right.
where everybody below a certain age is puffing on these things every 10
Right,
minutes.
right.
It's insane.
Right.
It is insane, and it seems to have worked in other communities. I think 1,000 feet
I think that's more responsible. So if you're going to choose,
I think 1,000 feet is a lot for a city our size. I think 1,000 feet in a city like Norfolk is a little different ballgame.
Can we talk about just, grades 6 through 12 and not the elementary schools?
and that's also what I was thinking too. Because if you're at 500 around elementary schools and 1,000 at the middle and high school, I think that's also a better compromise.
Just happened to Berkeley Glen,
And no, I was there.
Yeah, I don't know what you want. To me, it's, I don't know.
I don't know.
I've seen kids.
I don't know, I've flipped these things, I've
7, 8 years old.
I've
I
flipped
don't
these
know.
things around and
I don't
around
think
in my
you can
mind, and I've looked
But
for
they're-
what has worked in other communities.
You're gonna do it.
But is a 7-year-old buying vapes at the vape store?
Parents,
No, but if his
exactly.
15-year-old brother is,
Yeah.
I'll tell you just anecdotally, I have been, and I think I mentioned this at some point when we had the preliminary discussion, I was involved in a prosecution here in the city and involved over 5,000 vape cartridges. They all came off the internet from China.
oh, I'm not saying
Right.
that doesn't happen.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying that
And-
doesn't
And
happen.
that's it, and
Those are scarily dangerous.
but I think
Yeah.
the larger point remains, like, are we using a hammer to kill I can't think of the right metaphor.
Cannon for a mosquito?
Yes, exactly. Are we using a hammer when we should be using a different tool?
Because I almost, like you said, the sign ordinance idea as a joke, but that almost makes more sense as a starting point almost. Because then it's like, oh, you own the blinking neon vape sign instead it's a blinking neon T-shirt sign. And because again, I don't.
Yeah, I think the only thing I think we could do with a sign ordinance, if it was a legal business, we could not stop or control the name of the business in any way. So it would still say what it's going to say. But, we could look at things like the flashing or the, light outlining of business, and we would have to apply it across the board, like all businesses could not have flashing signs or, outlined lit buildings, we'd have to be consistent, but
So we've got all these little open signs.
Right, right,
We have to make an exception there, maybe?
we could not do anything to like stop someone from saying the name of their actual business if it is a legal business.
Okay. But it's an idea. What's the next one?
Next thing is,
Oh, no, I was looking at the next idea.
the next idea for this.
Funding the police for enforcement, applying for a grant.
But man,
Well-
give them the whole city's budget and they still have work to do, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just think education is important. I'm not going to lie. One of my coworkers called down to Waynesboro City Police Department to report one of the stores by the high school selling underage vapes, and the police officer who answered the phone said, "Well, as long as they're over 18, they can buy them." And she said, "Are you blanking kidding me? Do you know the law?"
Well,
So-
my own question, do we know the law?
So, and that was about 3 weeks ago. So, I don't know, maybe we need to fund more education for the police. I don't know what the story is.
No, it's just, they're busy. The crime doesn't stop
Exactly.
because,
Well, and I will
Right,
say,
right.
it's not an issue. I can't imagine that it's, given all the things that we have going on in the city, that vapes are at the forefront of every patrol officer's.
Exactly.
Right. Well, and I have talked to the chief, the chief has, since with the onset of this, they've sent more patrols by, whatever, but they can't be there all the time. They have other jobs to do,
But isn't that, but again, I mean, the ordinance that we're discussing isn't gonna address any of those problems necessarily, right? It's not gonna address the actual possession of the stuff by the kids. We're gonna address the potential of recruitment of new customers to this stores. That's right.
Or the ease of retail purchase, the ease of underage retail purchase. If they gotta walk 500 more feet, maybe they won't do it. Or maybe they won't, maybe they'll do it less, or,
good entrepreneur, we bring it to them.
You'll have a vape truck, a food truck.
5 for 5, sell for 10.
Yeah,
I don't know. If you don't think I've thought of every possibility, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't know the legal ins and outs of all this.
well, I mean, I am a lawyer and I don't know all the legal.
Right, but
aspects.
what I have is read weeks and weeks worth of information where other communities started and what worked in other communities.
What's the
And this seemed to have
timeframe
some
for the
impact.
other, is it true that the other three that you guys have looked at are still in the sort of planning phase for the
Or they have adopted those
ordinances? Has
ordinances?
anybody adopted an ordinance along these lines?
Williamsburg and Norfolk's are both adopted. Chesterfield is very close to be. It was at the Planning Commission late last month, and I believe they had a couple small revisions. I don't recall what those were, but there's some slight wording changes, and then it was going to go before the Board of Supervisors this month.
Wow. So we're still pretty fresh into this.
Has there been any discussion at the board of supervisors level?
I don't know, because I'm on the board of.
I was asking Ken.
Oh. Oh, I thought you were like, oh.
Say again?
Has there been any discussion about this at the board of supervisors level?
Yeah.
Staff has not presented this memo or technical, all the kind of research, that has not gone. So if that's something that the Planning Commission, would recommend that we do, that's something that we could, look.
Knowing that this was something that was coming from elected officials would definitely persuade me to reconsider.
That'd be a healthy decision.
I mean, we're just talking about proposing a zoning amendment text change to a city council.
Sure, it's council would have to adopt the
Right.
actual text
It's
amendment.
got to go from here to city council anyways for a vote up.
So if tonight there was some general consensus that staff could go back and draft, and if you all are kind of like, you're taking in the information, maybe next month or May 2nd, if there's additional ideas or additional thoughts, we could it certainly doesn't have to end here. But yes, so how it could move forward would be some general consensus around what a text amendment might look like. And then staff would go back and draft the actual amendment. And then, depending, probably bring it back to you prior to any public hearing scheduled, just for additional discussion. And then schedule a public hearing at the planning commission stage. And then you would make a recommendation on that text amendment to council. And they would hold another public hearing, and then they would make any final decisions, so.
Well, I think we've had a lot of information. I'm all for revisiting this again, and maybe 2 weeks is too soon. Maybe at the next regular meeting, we could revisit it with our thoughts, and if we thought some sort of text amendment might work, we could do that at the
And
next.
that would give you all time to kind of digest, think through things, and then maybe if you kind of come back prepared on, which way you're feeling, so we could get an idea of, whether we should pursue this additionally, or maybe now's not the time.
Right.
Do you, or could you get, I guess, probably the better way of putting it, is there a way to know or a way to find out how many uses, applications for uses consistent with what we would be prohibiting you've gotten, say, in the last 2 years, 5 years, right? Like, if these are things that are popping up at a rate of 1 every 3 months, I think that might change our calculus, whereas.
Yeah, we could get the information about, the ones that have come, kind of when they've come, and what types of things. So it's my understanding that based on kind of some of the initial discussion, we would be focusing specifically on the specialty stores. Obviously not prohibiting a Walmart from selling a portion of it. So yes, we could get that information.
Has this been a discussion with the school board? Do they talk about this?
I haven't heard anything.
I haven't heard anything.
I don't know
at
if
the
I
school
would,
board.
though, either.
I've talked about it with school administrators, but I don't know that it's, I've talked about it with,
Superintendent, yeah.
because I don't want to have a meeting without having a meeting.
So we'll put it on the agenda for not the May 2nd work session, but the next regular May meeting. And if any questions come up in the meantime, please send them our way, and we'll try and provide any additional information and see if there's a direction we want to go at that meeting, or if it's decided, maybe now's not the time.
Thank you very much for all your work on it. It was
Yeah, that was fantastic.
interesting.
Allison
Thank you.
did a great job.
Interesting. Very interesting. Review of minor subdivision and final subdivision plats approved since the March 21st, 2023 meeting.
So I do have one minor subdivision plat for you. This one was for tax map numbers 46-1-46, lots 4 through 8. It's located at 340 North Commerce Avenue. And there were some existing buildings here. They're doing, I believe, rehabilitation of the buildings into townhouses. And they were consolidating lot lines. For that. So that was the minor plat that was approved since your last meeting.
Okay.
I noticed the construction over there and was excited to see it.
Right.
I'd like to see more of that.
Yeah, particularly in that part of town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other matters from staff?
Do not have anything. We will send out the agenda prior to the May 2nd meeting, just kind of, we know that's like a little extra, so a reminder for everyone.
Okay. Yep. Commissioners' correspondence and communication, anybody have anything?
I've got an idea that I've been talking with the walkable. I think when I moved back to Waynesboro, I spoke with Steve. He's head of I think Walkable Cities. He works out of Stanton in Waynesboro. He does a school walk at least once a year with elementary school kids. And while I was talking with him, I came with this idea of maybe blocking Race Street specifically. This is the street between the new nature park and Constitution Park, because just from using the park a lot, using the greenway, being there with children, doing photography for soccer leagues, it doesn't seem like a necessary street for vehicles, especially now that there's a secondary park across the street from it. would you be willing to consider the idea of blocking that street with maybe like a temporary type of structure to see what that feels like? Come the summer when kids will be playing soccer at the field and then having maybe their younger brother cross the street to the smaller park.
Where is this again?
It's right down the street. If you go past, or it's right before the bridge. That road right before the bridge when you go through the light.
Goes from right, if you turn right after Mountain View Auto, it connects through back in front of the old Ice House building there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The last.
So you got
Because
Arch
even
and you got
driving
Ray
it,
Street.
you save maybe 30 seconds getting to that parking lot. It's really just the street that people use to skip the light.
Yep.
It's
Another
almost
one.
they use it to race to skip the light.
Yeah. Is that something we're allowed to talk, I mean, can we test it out, you know, is that something that is possible?
Like even something as simple as like some sort of simple concrete barrier, Jersey walls even.
So you're talking specifically about a temporary closure?
Just to see what it feels like. 'Cause
Okay.
Before we try anything permanent.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that a little bit more. I do know that there have been discussions in the past about potentially closing that roadway, and what that may or may not look like. It's all been prior to me, so I'm not super familiar with what the process has been or what the discussions have been, but I know it's been out there and around. And so the idea of maybe a temporary closure, is kind of interesting, so you can see maybe what that would look like in the future. So
Community reacts to it, give them an opportunity to feel that out.
sure. So yeah, I would have to look, if it is a recommendation of the planning commission for us to kind of look into that more and come back with like a process of what that could look like or what grant funding opportunities we may or may not be able to use to do that. That's certainly something we could do.
Okay, does somebody want to make a recommendation that we look into the process and possibility of a temporary testing and closure of Race Street?
I'll make a motion on that.
Someone make, everyone in favor? Aye.
I think it's Race Avenue.
Race
Race Avenue, I'm sorry.
Race Avenue, I'm sorry.
Expand park right over.
Exactly. No, you can turn it chalk, paint.
Right.
If you want to have a skate park in Waynesboro, I don't know. Like, there's just so many opportunities. When we have such a small downtown, why not make more use of it? Especially with the Nature Museum and that. Right there, so that'd just be another aspect to the downtown area.
Yeah, and I think it'll be, important for us to go have some discussions with Parks and Rec and identify kind of what are parking plans and areas for all of the changes that are going on, because there's so many different moving pieces right now in the city and so many different projects.
I think throwing that in a coffer is a great idea.
So we want to make sure, we work with them to kind of identify, because I know Parks and Rec is, heavily involved in, figuring out parking for that area and obviously what the park facilities will be like. So we'll work with them and kind of provide some more specific information back to you all.
So slightly less contentious than vaping, but I think. it could
Oh,
be
no, I
important.
think it's all good and it's all for the betterment
Yes,
of our
exactly.
community. So, and that's what we're here for, right?
Right.
So if we don't have anything else, does someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
Aye.
Everybody want to adjourn? We're done.